Let me introduce Scott Simon to you all. He is a happiness entrepreneur and founder of Scare Your Soul Courage movement. He is dedicated to creating, curating, and guiding experiences that will motivate and empower people around the world to be more courageous and happier in their own lives. He has presented around the world, appeared widely on television and on podcasts, given a TEDx talk, and leads retreats. He also works as a coach with individuals seeking dramatic change in their lives. His book, Scare Your Soul, by the way, it is available, as you all saw, for purchase. By the way, this is not that important, I know, but I want you to know, we sell these books for what we pay for them. We get a significant discount, and so we bring them, we get them delivered to us, because we want to encourage you to buy the book. So just want you to know that. It's not large amounts of money that are different, but it's our little way of saying this is a wonderful opportunity to purchase the book, and Scott will remain after the dialogue to sign them and personalize them as well. I hope you'll take one home, maybe two home. I can tell you, I've read the book, and I'm certain you'll find it worthwhile, and especially after hearing from him, all the more so. By the way, when I said take it home, you should know that Scott's home is in Cleveland. I looked up the temperature in Cleveland. Now you know why Scott's in Los Angeles. It's about, the low this morning was 16 degrees. So, little, is that a reaction you only get from people in Los Angeles? There's a lot more I could share with you about him, but why should you hear from me when we have the opportunity to hear from him, his passions, what he does for others, and what I suspect will be a most interesting evening. He's going to begin the evening with a little bit of an exercise. I do not know what this is. I do not know what we're getting into. I just want to say publicly, Stephen Weiss Temple does not indemnify any of us, but I don't know exactly. I've done a lot of these, as you know, over the years. This is the first time anybody has said, I want to start off with some sort of exercise. So I think, having had the privilege of spending some time with him just before, that we're really in for a treat. Please join me in welcoming Scott Simon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much. It's wonderful to be here. Yes, 16 degrees at home. So this is tropical and wonderful. I don't care how much rain. I was actually coming up Sepulveda, and the rain kind of parted, and there was just this incredible parting of the clouds. And I thought to myself, this is exactly where I need to be. So it's honestly so great to be with all of you. I did ask that we begin. First of all, I'm so glad to be here with this wonderful erudite leader of the Jewish community. And no, don't look behind you. And I mean that. So it's really an honor to be here both with David and with all of you. I asked that we begin with a little bit of an experience together, because I think when you talk about pushing comfort zones and dealing with fears, there is a sense sometimes that it happens outside of all of us. When we hear the term courageous, a lot of times we think it's somebody else that's courageous, not us. We can't be courageous. That's not who we are. We just do our thing, just living life. And so what I wanted to do was encourage you all to do a little exercise with me that might get the juices flowing a little bit and maybe get you out of your comfort zone a little bit. Is that okay with the group? Okay. So here's how it goes. If you can stand, please stand. If that is not comfortable for you, then you certainly don't have to. And what I want you to do is to find a partner. So there are going to be two of you. If you're in a row and it's just three of you, you can have a group of three. But if you're alone, you may want to find somebody else so that you have a partner. Everybody has at least one partner. Okay? This is an experience. We're all going to feel like we're back in kindergarten for a second, but I want you to trust me. This is an experience called clap, snap, stomp. Has anybody heard of clap, snap, stomp? Okay. And I've done this with the Ritz-Carlton and Nestle and the United Nations, so you're in very, very good hands. This is how clap, snap, stomp. Could you come up here for one moment, please? Deborah's going to help me demo this. So this is how clap, snap, stomp works. We're going to begin just by counting to 3 I'm going to say 1. Deborah will say 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we're going to do that. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, give her a round of applause. I think she did very well. Then what we're going to do, you're all going to do this. Then we're going to substitute a clap for the ones. This is called clap, snap, stomp. So it would be 2, 3. 1. But you're going to substitute a clap for the one. So it's 2, 3, 2, 3. Awesome. Great job. Well done. Well done. Now we're going to, after we do that, we're going to substitute a snap for the 2. So it'll be 3, 3. And on the final round, get ready, we're going to substitute a little stomp. Don't have to do a hard stomp for the 3. So it'll be, okay? So let's try that last one, just the two of us. Okay, you ready? I'll start. Okay, give her a round of applause. So now face your partners, and just begin by counting to 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Wait, are we doing it? Are you guys want to do it?
No, the 3 of us.
Okay. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Okay.
Great. Now I want you to substitute a clap for the 1. So it's clap, 2, 3. Great. Now you're going to substitute a snap for the 2. So it's clap, snap, 3. And finally, you're going to substitute a stomp for the 3. So it's clap, snap, stomp. Clap, snap, stomp. Everybody go ahead. Now do it 50% faster. No, just kidding, just kidding. Give yourself a round of applause. Wonderful job. That's our exercise.
I'm trying to think of something pithy to say. But you know what? That was more fun than I had in kindergarten. I'm telling you. Okay, so what we're going to do is, Scott, explore with you 4 areas of life. Snap, clap, and stomp. No. 4 areas that I thought about in reading your very thoughtful book. Start off with a little bit about the personal, about your life, because you're very open about it in the beginning of the book, which I applaud. Then we'll look at the 7 principles that you talk about when it comes to scare your soul life. What does it mean? And each of those 7 principles. The third, I'd like to talk with you about what do you do to move forward. And then finally, what you've learned since having written this book. So let's start with the personal. As I said, you're very open in writing this book about your life and your family. What were some of the most influential things that happened to you that helped you to grow as a human being, that shaped your thoughts about writing a book like this?
So, first of all, I grew up in a loving, warm Jewish family, a very scrappy Jewish family. My grandfather, who came to the United States in the early 1900s with his siblings on his own, decided that he wanted to go to Yale Architectural School after he put himself through college, went and met with the dean, who the dean told him that there was a limit on the number of Jews that they would allow into the class, but that if my grandfather could, over the course of 1 week, draw a symphony hall on a blueprint in pen and ink, that he would allow my grandfather into Yale. Wow. My grandfather took a train, not from New Haven to Cleveland, but into Manhattan, where he found an architectural agency, knocked on the door, asked for a drafting table for 1 evening, stayed overnight, drew the symphony hall, and put it on Dean Meek's desk the following morning, wow, which got him into Yale Architectural School. So that's when I think of my lineage, that's my lineage. Scrappy, passionate people and Jews. I was very much not that. I was probably the shortest kid in my grade growing up. I'm still not dramatically tall, but I certainly was the shortest back then. And I was chronically shy. Made it very hard to make friends. And I think things got very challenging for me when two boys began to bully me. And I'm very honest and open about it in the book. They used to spin me around in circles and let me fly off into the bushes. They did it both on our street as well as in front of the school so that all of my classmates saw it. They dislocated my shoulder 3 times. And the impact of that was for my life to become smaller and smaller. Because to me, staying quiet meant staying safe. And I remained that quiet and safe almost my entire childhood. Through high school, I ended up switching high schools. I ended up going to college and having to switch colleges. And my big highfalutin job at the age of 21, when I had gone through all of this schooling, was working the alternative music aisle at a local record store. And I honestly didn't think it was ever going to be any different until I received a call to potentially, if I would agree, teach English to Holocaust survivors in a low-income neighborhood of Tel Aviv, which would have required me to leave my home. I had not been bar mitzvahed growing up, so I knew no Hebrew. I'd never been to Israel before. I'd have to live with a family that spoke no English for a year and teach. I didn't know how to teach, and I really had no idea what it would be like being around Holocaust survivors. Everything was leading me to say no. But for some reason, I said yes. And saying yes led to what turned out to be the most impactful time of my life. If you've read the book, you know that I got on an El Al flight. For those of you who know El Al flights, you know it's a fairly chaotic environment. Not easy to, if you're new to it. And people were boisterous and loud, and I had a panic attack on the flight.
Right.
And I wrote out in a Mead spiral notebook, do one thing every day that scares you, in a fit of panic. And that changed the next year of my life, because every day that year in Israel, I chose one thing that pushed a comfort zone, and it changed my life.
By the way, I can't help but think of my favorite El Al story. El Al today is a fantastic airline with great service. But when you went on that flight, and in the years prior to that, it was not known for its service. And there was a story going around that a flight attendant came over to a passenger and said, "Would you like breakfast?" To which the passenger said, "Certainly. What are my choices?" And the flight attendant said, "Yes or no." So you spend this year in Israel, in a poor part of Israel, frankly, working with Holocaust survivors, and you decide to write down or do something sort of out of to courageous every day.
Yeah.
Do you remember what a couple of them were? Because I don't remember if you wrote them in the book.
So here's the key, and I do, because they started off very small. And I think that was part of the magic, it wasn't trying to bite off something bigger than I could chew. So I write in the book, the first was going to the post office by myself.
Oh, right, that's right.
Or saying hello to someone in Hebrew for the first time.
Right.
Literally almost micro action. Getting on an Egged bus. Do you all remember Egged buses, right? getting on an egghead bus and getting elbowed out of the way as I was entering. But I did it, and I did it myself. And the key thing was having this spiral notebook to record these in, because now that I do this every day, I'm so aware of the importance of celebration. When we do hard things in life, and we all do hard things, we're all courageous in our own ways. The ability to take a step back and to celebrate those things is so critical. And I did that. I didn't know it at the time what I was doing, but I would write it in that spiral notebook, and it became like a living document of courage, which shifted. I know you and I both care deeply about identity, the concept of identity. It shifted my identity from being not only a scared kid, but just being a person living life to being a courageous person living life. And that shift allows you to do pretty incredible things.
So I started reading Scott's book, and I shared this with him at dinner about a month ago when I was on a little bit of a vacation, not a little bit, a vacation with my wife and some friends in Palm Desert. And around 11:30 at night, I went down to the lobby of the hotel, and I opened up this book. I mean, obviously I had an interest in it, or that's what attracted me to have you come here. But I thought, oh boy, is it going to be another one of these self-help books, which isn't going to be, it's going to be sort of the same. And I turned to page 12, and I'm going to read to you a quote by Viktor Frankl, who many of you know Viktor Frankl, because I've talked with you about him. One of the most influential books of my life, Man's Search for Meaning. And on page 12, Scott writes the following, quoting Dr. Frankl: "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. When we're no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." So many of you know that Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. The first half of his book is his experiences. The second half of his book is about logotherapy. And that particular paragraph I had highlighted in the book as one of the most influential within influential parts of the book that I had found. And I ran upstairs, it was around now midnight or 1 in the morning, and I said to my wife, God, is this guy deep? When somebody starts quoting Viktor Frankl at that early on, I said, I know I was in for a good ride. What was it about that one particular quote that so moved you to include it in the book?
I can answer it on two levels. One is very visceral. When I was teaching English to these incredible people who had been through so much, I would teach a class and spend some time with them. The men would play chess, the women would crochet, they would go off into these separate rooms. And the men would kick me out after about 5 minutes, and I'd go with the women and kibitz with them as they were crocheting. And then every once in a while, I would find my way upstairs. There was a little library upstairs in this Moadon Kashish, this home for the senior center. And almost all the books were in Hebrew, but there was one book in English. And I pulled it out, and here I am on this quest myself to try to push my comfort zone every day. And what Beshert happens, but Man's Search for Meaning is the book in English, a story of somebody who has gone through the depths of the worst of humanity and is able to somehow have the wherewithal to know that he controls his own attitude, that regardless of circumstances, I mean, how could there be a more powerful thought than at the worst moments we actually maintain control?
Which, by the way, without that, the whole book nothing works, right?
Exactly.
Because it means we have a choice as to how we're going to respond.
We have the choice between stimulus and response. There's a space. And in that space is our ability to choose. And I will say that Frankl said something else in that book that really struck me. And that is, there is a gap between what we have done in our lives, what we have done, and who we are yet to be. And that there is a tension in that gap. Why that is so meaningful to me personally is this. We live in a society that wants us or tells us that we need to be happy, comfortable, and live a seamless life. Buy this car and you'll be happy. Wear this perfume and you'll be happy. Go to the grocery store and buy everything wrapped in saran wrap. You're going to get it home and you're going to be happy. And what Frankel is saying is it's actually in the tension that we live our life. And for somebody who is passionate about grappling with fear and grappling with challenge and making that the work of our life, that quote and that concept meant so much to me.
So let's talk about fear and courage, but let me ask you to define courage.
Yeah.
And why is it important?
How much time do we have? Courage, as you can imagine, has multiple definitions. The one that I like best is stepping into a moment of fear or apprehension by choice for an intentional, lofty goal. Okay? I want to create a distinction here between courage and bravery. Bravery, to me, feels more tactical. I'm brave because, well, I got a splinter in my toe. I'm going to bravely go to urgent care and have it taken out. Courage has...
In other words, that's not a choice.
It's not a choice. It's,
Okay.
it's an act of connecting with fear in a moment, truly. Courage has this beautiful, lofty aspect to it. There's an inspiring notion about courage. And why it's important, I could probably talk to you for 3 hours about. But I really do believe that to lead a life full of vulnerability and connection and love and creativity and joy, we must be courageous. That those things come through effort and through stepping into moments of discomfort where we gain the most important things in life. And I want to live, and I want for everyone else to live, I feel like this is my path, to live the fullest, best life they can. And to do so is to dance with fear.
So I listened carefully to what you just said. So is courage a prerequisite for happiness? In other words, can one... Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Do you need to be courageous to be happy?
So I think that I'm going to answer that in the framework of what Maya Angelou said, because I cannot argue with what Maya Angelou said. And she said the following: of all of the virtues, courage is the most important, because every other virtue is founded upon courage. That we cannot act in our fullest way unless we step into that place of discomfort. And I really believe that very strongly. And I think that, you know, I got a degree in positive psychology from a wonderful mentor of mine, Tal Ben-Shahar, who wrote books about happiness. And I was very enamored with happiness for many, many years. And I obviously, it's a goal that we all have, and it's part of who we are as human beings to want to be happy. I think what I have learned, you asked me, and I'm going to speed forward just for a second to answer this. I have stopped my fixation on happiness as an end goal. Courage to me feels like the lever. What ends up happening to me in the end is I'm happy. But what gets me there is courage.
Right, so it's happiness in that regard is a byproduct.
Indeed it is.
Right, fair enough. So let's talk about scare your soul, living a scare your soul life.
Yeah.
Right, and you suggest in your book that there are 7 steps
Yeah.
to getting there, and each of them, I think, merits a look.
Yeah.
And the very first one that you talk about is gratitude. So I have 2 questions. First of all, there's a great, I think it's worth you sharing the story of this woman, Carly, and what has happened since then. And I want to ask you how all of us can cultivate a greater sense of gratitude in our lives.
It's appropriate that we're here talking about a sense of gratitude because it is foundational in religious thought and practice. Right. I was working one day in my home office, and I got an email. And the email said, "Hi, Scott, you don't know me, but my name is Carly, and I need to meet with you. How about this Saturday night at 10 p.m.? Please don't say no. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands to say how many of you would answer that email. But I do one thing every day that scares me, so I did answer that email. And I responded and I said, you're right, I don't know you, but you seem intent on meeting with me, and yes, my house, here's my address, I'll see you on Saturday night. This was on a Tuesday, by the way, so I had to wait from Tuesday to Saturday to see what would happen. And indeed, at 10 p.m. on the dot, knock on my front door, and I open it up, and there is Carly. Blonde hair, ripped jeans, tattoos down her arm, and she looked at me and she smiled and she said, I'm Carly, we need to talk. So I invited her in, and she sat on my couch, and she proceeded to tell me the following. She has 3 boys, one of whom was diagnosed with a terminal illness and was at NIH, National Institutes of Health. She was about to get divorced. She was in a family business that was not providing her joy or passion in any way. And she looked at me and she said, I just want to be happier. And I see you and Scare Your Soul online, and I just figured if I spent some time with you, you'd help me get happier. And I said, well, I don't know if I can do that, but let's talk. And I shared as much as she did. I shared about getting divorced and feeling like a failure as a dad, trying to co-parent 2 young children and still providing them dinosaur chicken nuggets while I was trying to do laundry and putting them in front of a video instead of spending time with them and working on homework. And we shared for 3 hours. On the way out, she told me I was her soul brother. And she said to me, this is where we get to the gratitude part, she said, it's going to be a tough week ahead because we're calling in the lawyers in our divorce, and I think it's going to be terrible. Would you send me 5 things you're grateful for each night for a week by text? Just text it to me. And I said, sure, of course, and will you do the same for me? And she agreed. So for 7 nights, we texted 5 things, and they're actually in the book, what I texted that first night. And it was so much fun, and it was so powerful that we continued on the following week, and then the following week after that. And as of a couple of months ago, we have been texting each other 5 gratitudes a night for 9 years.
So is your suggestion to us that we all text Carly?
Yeah.
No, seriously, I mean, I think it's, from what I'm getting from that is it forces you, it's not so much for the other person, but it forces you to write down 5 things that you're grateful for.
It's a very appropriate question to ask, what is courageous about being grateful?
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that I address that. And I'm going to address it the way that it has happened to me and Carly. And that is the following. When you text somebody 5 things, and we don't repeat, by the way, 5 new things every night for 9 years, our gratitudes have changed dramatically from the beginning. And this is, I hope, meaningful. When we began, it was, I'm grateful for the sunshine, I'm grateful for roses and for my kids, and pretty quickly, we began to transition to other things. And if you read our texts, which I will do tonight before going to bed, they are more often than not the hard things that happen in our day, the challenging moments. Because we have seen over 9 years the importance that challenging moments have for us, because we look back on them and we see those as the fulcrum moments. We see those as the moments where something shifted, where there was an insight, whether the clouds parted or they didn't. We recognized in a moment that hard times can be just as important and just as beautiful as the sun parting through the clouds. So for us, we call it radical gratitude. It's gratitude, but it's gratitude for the real things in life, not just the rosy things in life.
You know, it's interesting because you alluded to religious institutions and gratitude. Many of you know that the first thing a Jew is traditionally does in the morning is say the words Moda ani lefanecha, thank you for breathing life back into me. In other words, not even taking for granted that you woke up in the morning. There's the tradition at Ser Yatzar where even using the bathroom, you say a bracha, a prayer, that literally your tunnels and passageways opened and worked, and we all kind of smile at it until the day that it doesn't. Or even there's a list in this room every Thursday. The kids in the 5th grade and other grades say the prayers in our day school, and they're called Nisim B'chol Yom, the miracles of everyday life. And that is one of the way religion, when it's done right, can cultivate a sense of gratitude. So I think the two are related. Let's look at the next one, adventure. Your second point, your second sort of step is adventure, and you have a great line, I want to quote it. The biggest myth about leading an adventurous life is that we must travel to experience one. The truth is, adventure is a state of mind, not a set of driving directions. So, what's the relationship between adventure and courage? And here too, if so, how do we cultivate that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think when we think about adventure, we oftentimes think of getting on a plane and going to a different country where we don't know the customs, and I became really enamored with the concept of what does adventure look like in our daily lives? What does it mean to look into the eyes of the person sitting next to us? What does it mean to live life as an unfolding journey? Not as a series of stops and take a photo, but as an evolving roadmap that we get to live. And to view life that way, in many cases, takes courage, and I think I know why. It's easy to do the same thing all the time. Our bodies and our brains, there's a whole section of the book where I kind of geek out on the neuroscience of what fear is and why our bodies want us to remain in homeostasis. It makes sense. It's safe to remain in a rut. It keeps us very, very safe. It's hard to push ourselves out of that. But I think those of you who do consider yourself adventurers, whether it means externally or even in your own intellectual mind, what does it mean to be a journey or an adventure intellectually? How gorgeous is that of a thought? And do we really think about that? So what I encourage in the book, and the book, by the way, is very much, I almost considered it like a love letter between me and the reader. This isn't somebody on high saying, you should do this and you should do that. It is a lot of exercises and prompts and modes of reflection, so that if some of these concepts are new or they need to be fleshed out, that the reader can engage with them in a way. And so I really do encourage thinking about adventure differently and putting ourselves out there in a way that we're really viewing our daily lives in very much that same way, as a mode of adventure.
The third principle is energy. And the thing I remember about this one is he's suggesting to us, and by the way, for this alone, you may not want to buy the book, is that we all take a nice cold shower. That's part of the energy part, right?
It is.
Okay, let's talk about that real quickly.
Yeah. We can go over that real quickly. And for those of you who are aware of, like Admiral McCraven, I don't know if any of you saw a wonderful commencement speech that Admiral Bill McCraven gave about making your bed in the morning.
Yeah.
That first thing in the morning you make
great.
your bed, and the kind of psychic benefits of making your bed. I really do believe, and behavioral science bears it out, that small changes in our daily habits, putting ourselves out of our comfort zone in small ways, increase our levels of energy. They increase our levels of interest in engaging in the world in new ways. One of our ambassadors, so we have about 50 ambassadors for Scare Your Soul. They're wonderful volunteers. One of them is a cold shower expert. Yeah. Indeed. He's written books about cold showers. I know, doesn't it make you cold just even hearing about it? And he said to me, take a hot shower, and for the last 10 seconds, turn it to cold, and you're done. And I did it, and I put it out to our Scare Your Soul community, and it actually was one of our most popular challenges that we have ever had. It is easily doable, It's not easy in the moment, but it's something that everybody can do. One of our other challenges, by the way, that people love is buying a cup of coffee for a stranger and having a conversation with the stranger after you buy the cup of coffee. But a cold shower is something that is so easy to do, and you're signaling to yourself, I'm making a change.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not advocating it, but I think there are some medicinal benefits to it. Apparently it very much, we have some Knott's Head, apparently it raises some, your level of resistance to disease.
Resistance and also your circulation and other, the ambassador, his name is Jesse Harless. He has a wonderful book on taking cold showers.
So
he has taken a cold shower for many, many years.
And I have a friend who gets up every morning at 4 in the morning. He takes a cold shower, but only a cold shower. He needs help. So let's go to, you mentioned buying a cup of coffee for a stranger. That, I think, was your example for your next principle, which you call curiosity.
Yes. I think that, and this again, I think is almost societal. I spent some time in a coffee shop one day thinking about I put out a courage challenge each week. I've probably done 500 or so courage challenges for people. And I watched people as they were walking into this coffee shop. And what do you think they were doing from the moment that they walked in to the moment that they, looking down, scrolling, maybe looking up to order, scrolling, sit down, scrolling, drink, scrolling. And I decided in that moment, and it's in the book, to get up from where I was sitting and to get in line and then to have a conversation with the person behind me.
Right.
And I've done that now probably 70, 80 times. Each time I end up, I'm the joyous recipient, not them. They get a cup of coffee and that's nice. The feeling you get when you push yourself just a little bit and you're doing it, here's the key, as an act of service and an act of curiosity, you want to find out about that person. I mean, I had a woman invite me to her tattoo studio. I've had incredible conversations with people just because I was curious. And I think that there's a little utzing internally.
Yeah, sure.
But it's like once you get hooked on this, you can't stop. And then you're starting to lead your life in this beautiful, external, curious way.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. It has become normal not to acknowledge other people. It has become normal to get into an elevator and not greet the person who you used to greet. It's acceptable to be on that device or something. And I remember when I was living in New York and we took buses or subways. Subways, people don't acknowledge each other's existence, but nearly as much. But on buses, people would nod, how are you, something. Today, you can get into your building and go upstairs, for example, if you live in an apartment building, and other than nod, not even acknowledge, all the more so in an office building. And I fear a society where people don't at least acknowledge the humanity of the other person. So the curiosity of the other person is interesting, but you also talk about being curious about yourself.
Yes.
Can you talk about it? Because you give forget the example that I'm thinking of that you give, but what do you mean by being curious about inner curiosity?
Yeah, I think this is one of those undiscovered treasures. Those of you who have either spent time in a silent retreat or in an environment where you only had yourself to talk to. I mentioned my mom had a stroke recently and is spending a lot of time in a rehab facility. And family is there as often as we possibly can be, but she has alone time. And that has encouraged her to really do deep thinking that we tend to forget when we're leading our lives from thing to thing and calendar and phone and kids and life. My strong suggestion, and I suggest it to all of you, is to go on a self-date. And a self-date is to go out to a restaurant, preferably a restaurant or a coffee shop, with no phone, no magazine. I know I'm stressing you out already by bringing it up. But to see then how you react, what comes up for you in that moment? Does it feel comfortable? Does it feel uncomfortable? What thoughts are coming to you? And all of a sudden, you start bubbling up all of these preconceived notions you may have about yourself or what others are thinking about you. It's a fascinating experience. And then once you do that, you start to get hooked on the concept of what does it really mean to be me? What it really means to be me. And then, again, this is probably another topic that could take us 3 hours. That's a gateway drug for connection with other people, because if you don't know yourself, how can you really be vulnerable and loving to other people? How can you really show love to your loved ones if you don't know what this is all about? And so for many people, that's a highly courageous act. Sometimes it's harder to spend some time alone than it is, getting to know other people in a social setting. So I really encourage in the book lots of techniques about how to get to know yourself better and how to kind of push through the fear to do that.
So I tried that. I went to a coffee shop by myself, and some jerk walked up to me and started a conversation. I'm joking, wasn't it?
Was that jerk me? I don't remember.
I'm joking. But the example in the book that you give, I thought was very telling, about this woman who, when asked her favorite color, she said green, but she never really realized why green was her favorite color. And it seems like a very simplistic example, but it's not. Many of the things that we hold that define ourselves, we don't always know the origin of it, and maybe shouldn't necessarily embrace that.
So thank you for bringing that up. I really love this story. It's a very simple concept. I heard somebody who's an expert in fear one time talk about the fact that somebody asked her, she's probably in her mid-60s, what her favorite color was. And she said, green, right? If I asked each one of you, you would all tell me what your favorite color is. And somebody finally said to her, why is green your favorite color? And she had to think back. Now keep in mind, she's in her mid-60s. Do you know what she came up with? When she was in kindergarten, she had a crush on a boy who said that his favorite color was green. And she said, mine too. Mine too. And never changed her mind. Never thought about it. And I love that little gem of a story, because what that raises for all of us is, what are the stories that we tell ourselves? What are the assumptions that we make about ourselves when we don't go into that sense of radical inquiry? And yet, in my view, it really does take courage to do that. But again, like almost everything in the book, I think once you start it, you're on a path, and it's a path that you can't turn away from.
Very nice. So we have gratitude, adventure, energy, curiosity, and the next one, by the way, speaking of curiosity, I'm curious. We sent out a postcard about this event. Raise your hand if you got the postcard. This is helpful. Raise your hand if you didn't get the postcard. Okay, that's helpful. All right, thank you. So then you talk about awe, A-W-E. I want to read, I excerpted a couple of things, but I just wanted you to read this and then ask you a couple questions. This is what you write. It takes courage to live this way, speaking of awe, because we are attuned to be immediately entertained and amused. We are attuned to the concrete, the clear, the controllable. Amazement requires a leap of faith. It requires time, effort, and consideration. It requires engagement in the world. And you quote Einstein, too, by saying there are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle. And I remember one year on High Holidays, my sermon was about, what the topic was, living a life of awe. And Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel calls, it's been referred to as radical amazement. And I think that the question I have is, how do you develop it? Part of it is having curiosity. Part of it is all the things you just mentioned, curiosity, adventure, gratitude. But the question of sustaining it is difficult. And I'll give you an example. If I had told any of us in this room 35 years ago that you could carry something in your pocket that would allow you to make just a telephone call to somebody, you would say, Woznica, what are you talking about? And then in the 90s, we could buy this big phone that you pulled out the thing and you paid by the second and you looked at your watch, oops, coming up on 2 minutes, and you hang up, right? And that was state of the art. And that was awesome. And then somebody created a flip phone. Oh my God, you could put this in your pocket. And then a smartphone. And then it was the iPhone 3. And that was beyond belief. Forget the BlackBerry, that was by the wayside. The iPhone 3, you could call, you could look up. But none of us would think an iPhone, it doesn't blow any of you away. As a matter of fact, your kids would think you're a Neanderthal. An iPhone, I mean, I have an iPhone 12, and I'm a Neanderthal compared to some other people. In other words, that which gives us a sense of awe, by definition, at some point, you lose it.
Yeah.
How does one maintain, and I have a friend who has really lives with that awe, and as a result, he has fostered that sense of awe in me in not taking things for granted. But how does that make you courageous? And how do you keep that up? How do you, keep fostering it?
Yeah, I think this is one of those more ephemeral issues that provide so much value in life when we take the time to slow down, to cultivate it, to pay attention to it. I'm going to answer your question very simply by saying all of the research says that the best way to plug into awe and to do so consistently, you can probably guess it, is to spend time in nature. To go for a walk, to slow down, to pay attention, to look at the sky, to hear the birds, to enter a mindful experience. I think that awe is one of those things that, again, is negated oftentimes by our distracted life. But I do think that I love Heschel's view on radical amazement, that if we actually slow down and paid attention to our lives, the iPhone example is a perfect one. Heschel probably would have written about the iPhone had it been around, is if we take time and really think about it, we could be amazed by just about everything in life. The fact that these lights are on,
right.
The fact that we all got here tonight.
That's right. No,
All
you're
of
right.
it. All of it. So how to lead a life like that? And I chose a little example that I like to use in my own life, and it's called the sliding door moment. Does anybody remember a movie from the 90s called Sliding Doors? Yeah. Oh my gosh, a lot of nods. And the concept of sliding doors was Gwyneth Paltrow is running to get the subway or the tube, and the doors close in one story, and she just gets through in the other, and you can see her life bifurcated. And I was really thinking about that when I was writing this book, and I thought to myself, think about those moments. Think about somebody that you love that's not a relative in your life, just someone that you just adore, a best friend, a rabbi, somebody in your life that you just adore. And then think about how you met them and what could have happened that day to take you off into another direction. Maybe something was late, or you got a phone call, or somebody canceled something, and you would have never met this person who is so critical to your being. And I started to think about that, and then I started to think about all of my relationships and how lucky I am and how much awe I have that those actually things worked out in a way that I met that person, and now I couldn't even imagine living without them. That's the exercise that I put in the book. That's an example of how, I see hugging in the audience. This is amazing. These are the kind of things that I think when we pay attention to them, and sometimes it does take courage. We have to stop the busyness and the distraction and the easy stuff, and we have to plug into nature and love and passion and appreciation and gratitude. But when we do those, I think we're leading our fullest life.
You know, one of the other ways to do it, I remember going up to Sacramento and stopping at a jelly bean factory. I love factories. You know, the reason I do is because you see what goes into creating, I see what goes into creating so many things that I take for granted. What goes into creating cereal, jelly beans, tea, where it comes from and where it ends up. We don't see those steps. And this isn't going into nature. This is whatever happens, you know, the number of steps that it takes for things to go right is extraordinary. You get on an airplane, you're in a capsule going 630 miles an hour, 37,500 feet above the earth, and you're upset that they ran out of half and half for your coffee. Now think about it. I am, because we have standards, the expectations. It's unbelievable what we experience often on a day-to-day basis. So that sense of awe, I think, can be cultivated if you just step back in almost everything. Nature has its own method as well. So let's look at number 6 of the 7, forgiveness.
Yeah.
Not one which I would have expected. Tell me about the relationship. I see forgiveness as a moral trait. Tell me about the role of forgiveness, though, in terms of courage.
Yeah. I actually see it very much in the courage realm, because I think of all the things that we do in life that feel like they're pushing us out of our comfort zone, so many people hold on to bitterness and anger.
Yeah.
We're wronged, or someone we love was wronged. And I believe that forgiveness is a very energetic and active and courageous step in life. I'm very honest in the book about modes of forgiveness that I have chosen in my own life, and I have some exercises that I think dredge up and pull to the surface some things that maybe people should pay attention to. But I have seen, and I talked to so many people when I was writing this book, people mired in grudges, bad feelings, and I came up with a little bit of a concept. Maybe other people have done this previously, but I had kind of the idea of, does the person actually need to be there and hear you for you to forgive them? And maybe everybody feels this way, but I don't think it really came to me until I wrote the book, and I realized that I could forgive people without having to call them and say, and engender whatever response they would give me. But I could proactively, in my own heart and soul, forgive them and be free. Be free. And I love that. And again, you know, I think a lot about energy. I studied meditation for a long time. I've studied in all kinds of different lineages, as well as Judaism. And I think of energy a lot. And I think a lot of times bitterness and anger and those emotions feel very energetic for people. It's easy to get riled up and to feel in control of our emotions when we're feeling bitterness and anger. And it takes courage sometimes to let that go and to say, you know what, I'm going to move on. And to sometimes not even feel the need to call that person and say, I want to meet with you over coffee and I want to forgive you. To just sit there, make the space, call forth all of the emotions, and wholeheartedly, not in word, but in deed, forgive that person.
So just to bolster your point, I've shared this before, but I think it bears repeating. Rabbi Harold Kushner of blessed memory, who we had dialogues here before, and gives a very poignant example of a woman who had gone through a divorce and 10 years earlier, and her former husband left her in a very difficult situation. She had to go to work full-time to support 2 kids, and he was unsupportive of her, and very difficult thing. And she came in to meet with Rabbi Kushner and told her of the plight. And he said to her, for the last 10 years, you've been holding a hot coal in your hands, getting ready to throw it at him, waiting for the opportunity. Let me tell you what he's done during those last 10 years. He remarried, had children, moved to Jersey, got a job. And all you have for the last 10 years is a burned hand. It stuck with me when he shared that example. Sometimes, here's where it's not a moral thing, but a selfish thing in the best sense, it becomes to our advantage to say, you know what, I'm going to let it go. And if any of you have ever done that, you could probably share with me or with one another how that has benefited you. So let's take a look at the last one. Gratitude, adventure, energy, curiosity, awe, forgiveness. By the way, if Rabbi Zeldin of blessed memory were here, he would have had an acronym for that. He would have had one word where he could...
That's book number 2,
yeah.
the acronym.
The last one you speak about is work.
Yeah.
And I love the poignant story of the 94-year-old man who didn't become a baseball player.
So,
Why is, talk about work and courage first, forgive me.
yeah, sure. So I really felt that it was important to address the issue of work. And when I use work, I want to use it broadly in the mode of creation, whether it's a job that one has or somebody is creating things in the world. And I think this falls into a category I know you and I both care deeply about, and that is pushing through the worry about what others are going to feel about us and the approval of other people, which limits, in my view, innovation, creativity, stepping out of the box. I now get the opportunity to speak to companies and CEOs about this work. And there is a deep innovation gap in this country. And so much of it, I think, comes from the worry about being canceled or not approved of or not agreed with. And it stifles our opportunity to create things in the world. So I talk a lot in the book about how to move past that. And this could even be in art, really focusing on the word creation. And I come to this, the rabbi just mentioned an interaction that I had. I was at my aunt's Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago. She has a big cocktail hour before Thanksgiving starts. It's a big hoo-ha, and everybody has cocktails, and then you go in and have dinner. And I saw a man that I did not know in a wheelchair sitting by himself in the cocktail hour. And not wanting him to sit alone, I went up to him, and he introduced himself. His name is Ron. And he heard that I was writing a book at the time, and he told me the story. And the story was that he was a phenom, a baseball pitcher that just was unhittable when he was in high school, 101 miles an hour, and he pitched the ball from different sides of the mound. If you could imagine, different sides of the mound, 101 miles an hour, and he was absolutely unhittable. And so he's 94 years old when he's telling me this story. He's 17 in the story. He gets a visit, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, from a scout from the Cleveland Indians who said, I want to get you a contract to play for the minor league team for the Cleveland Indians. He calls his dad and he says, I'm so excited. Could you come down because I'm a minor and I can't sign the contract? He's telling me this while we're in this cocktail hour. And his father said, you will do no such thing and neither will I. Baseball is a game. You're going to come work in our family knitwear business, which he did do. The business went out of business in the 50s. And he looked at me, and I swear to you, it was like only he and I existed in the universe together. And he put his hand on my hand. I had it on his wheelchair. And he said, promise me you're going to do what you love to do. Promise me. Because I've regretted that day my entire life. And it just raised for me, he listened to somebody who told him that he couldn't, he shouldn't, he can't, he should, and he knew what his passion was, and he didn't fulfill it. I'm sorry to say he passed away over the summer on July 4th, but I lucked into an interaction with somebody, and his story will live on in this book.
I find, first of all, when people don't have courage, especially if they're in leadership positions, and make decisions out of fear because they're worried about the repercussions or they're worried about being loved or worried about offending people, they almost always make the wrong decision because it's not made out of conviction and it's not made out of values. By definition, it's what are the repercussions? And you can't be a fool and just do everything willy-nilly. But if you have values in life, I think the only way to advance those values, to be a decent person, is to have a certain level of courage. And I know for me, that having a couple of very courageous people in my life, friends, in one case a family member, in one case a friend, has been helpful to me in developing a deeper sense of courage. Sometimes just by looking at them and seeing their willingness to do what they do makes you rethink how you want to live your own life. So let's come to the last part, and let's talk about what you mentioned, what you've learned since writing this book a little bit. And you allude to Judaism in your writing. I know that you've worked in the Jewish community many, many years ago. Today is a difficult time to be a Jew in America, something I never would have thought I would have ever said. Certainly a difficult time to watch how the world has reacted to the horror in Israel. What does it mean to you, Scott, as a Jew to be courageous today?
I think that now, probably more than ever in my entire life, there is the imperative to be courageous in the Jewish world. I think Jews, by our very nature, have a courageous imperative within us. It's in our stories. And there is, I think, the opportunity now for all of us to step into things we have never done before, whether that's religiously, whether that's strengthening the fabric of the Jewish people, whether it is standing up and speaking out, whether it is showing pride. I have a dear teacher named Maria Sirois who mentioned to me the other day that one of the best things that we could all do in this time is just to take on one new observance, one new step forward towards our observance. How powerful would that be if Am Yisrael, everybody in some way took on something new? And I think we run the risk of saying that there is a catch-all, that everybody should do something. But what I do think is everybody can do something. And I think that for those of us who have spent time in the Jewish community, I worked at a federation for a decade and I've been involved as a volunteer, that feels very activated for me. I feel like I know how to do that. I know how to access ways for me to feel like I'm making a difference. But I really feel like if this is something that we all reach down deep inside of ourselves, at a time when paralysis feels strong for many, trauma feels strong for many, that can we be, this is going to be maybe a controversial statement, can we be courageous enough to have hope in this moment? At a time when things feel as awful and painful and scary as they have ever felt in our lifetimes, many of us, can we be courageous enough to carry a torch forward of hope?
Right. You know, it's someone was asking me, they had a fear of wearing a Mogen David, a Star of David, or having their mezuzah up in their house. And I said, you know what? Here we are in Los Angeles, in the comforts of a city which is overwhelmingly safe. Everyone will make their own choice. But if we don't feel we can do at least that, what a statement. When you think of what Israelis are going through every day, what you think of what our people have gone through historically, and all we have to do is come to a rally or put up a mezuzah, or if anything, it's a chance to double down and be proud and have the hope in the future. And I'm reminded that the phrase in the Bible attributed to God more than any other phrase, and I learned this from Rabbi Kushner, but he shared it in other arenas as well, but it's particularly poignant. The phrase that God says more than any other phrase in the Bible, Al Tira, do not fear. Is that powerful? God does not want us to live a life of fear. I want to close by reading the last paragraph from your book, because I think it's a nice way to end. You write, "Dear reader, it has been an honor to be alongside you in the greatest work that any of us can do. As we part, I will share with you the immortal words of John Wayne." You knew we would quote John Wayne when you were in a synagogue. "Courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. Can't you just hear him saying that? Imagine his voice. Courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. I encourage you in your bold journey ahead. I wish you years full of gratitude, adventure, energy, curiosity, awe, forgiveness, and meaningful work. And I hope you don't ever stop scaring your soul. Please join me in thanking Scott Chandler. Thank you.